So it's Thanksgiving. At New Year's, it really seems that we always are looking forward, right? Well, at Thanksgiving, it's like we're looking back. We're looking back at not so much looking forward, but looking backwards and being thankful. The way we celebrated Thanksgiving when I was growing up is it was either in Florida or Atlanta. Right? We either went down to Tampa, to where my grandparents are, which, surprise, we're going over there later this afternoon. And we either went down there, and then we spent Christmas in Atlanta, or vice versa. And I can remember the times when we spent Thanksgiving in Atlanta with my family, and because that way it was all my mom's family and my dad's family all together. And what we would do is my parents have kind of a long, skinny dining room, and they would put together about 3 or 4 tables and make one long, huge table, right? They'd make this one large, huge table, and everyone would sit, there'd be like 20 of us sitting around this one table and all of that. And it was just fun, and I have great memories of it. And I'm sure I could go around, and many of you have great memories about Thanksgiving. And it's good to remember, to stop and remember. And Thanksgiving calls us to do that. It calls us to stop for a second and remember the past and remember what's going on. And that's what's happening in our Old Testament lesson from Deuteronomy, is that God is having them remember. Because in Deuteronomy, they've been wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years, right? And they're about to go into the land of Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey. All right, okay. Maybe gravy and turkey or stuffing or something like that. Like they're about to go in there, and it's kind of a call. It's like, hey, stop, remember and be thankful. But when they stop and remember, it doesn't seem like they all have all that much to be thankful for, right? Like they're wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years. They've had very little water. They've had no food, no land, and it seems like they've had no hope as well. They've been wandering around in this desert, in this wilderness, and they're about to take possession of the land. So, when we look at our reading today, it says, remember the whole commandment that I commanded you. Today you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land that the Lord swore to give you to your fathers. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that it might humble you, that in testing you, that you would know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you in your hunger, and he fed you there, which you did not know, nor that your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from his mouth. So right before they move into the new promised land, they're asked to remember. Remember how God has led them even in the bad times. Remember how they had nothing. They had no food, but God created manna, whatever that was. They had no drink, but he caused water to come from a rock. They had no guidance, but God was with them, guiding them. It even says that they had no need for clothing because their clothing never wore out. Now they're about to take possession of the land, and they are thankful. And they're thankful that even when it looked like God wasn't there, that he was with them, guiding them every day. And I hope this encourages you, because oftentimes our lives can be kind of messed up in this world, or we live in kind of a broken world, and it seems like we have nothing. And maybe this year, as you sit around your turkey or your ham or whatever weird Thanksgiving tradition you have, we had fajitas one year. that you and you think about what you're thankful for, that maybe you've had a good year, but maybe your year has been kind of like the Israelites, that your health is nothing, that your wealth is struggling, that your relationship with your spouse may be on the rocks, but you're kind of holding it together. And oftentimes it seems like we struggle in all these things, but God is there. Because in verse 4 of that Deuteronomy passage it says, "And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know what it was, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but lives by every word that comes from the mouth." Not only does God give you what you need to live each day, he gives you his word. And in Jesus, his word was made flesh, and it lives with us all. And I love right before Jesus goes to the cross, that goes to the cross to basically usher us all in to the promised land. Right before he goes into that, he has a meal with his disciples. And do you remember what he says? Remember, he says on the night that he was betrayed, he took bread, and when he given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them. Do you remember why he said all that? That you would remember. That you would remember. The word there that we call it is the Eucharist, which is charis, which means grace or joy. That we call the Eucharist, that charis, that joy, that in the midst of, right before all of the Word made flesh's sufferings, he was bringing us grace and joy and restoration. So give thanks. Be thankful that even in the midst of the good times and the bad, that God is calling us to remember that through all the bad stuff and the good stuff, he's still bringing us joy and grace that is found in his kingdom. And I think that's kind of what Thanksgiving's all about. So as you sit around Thanksgiving, just stop and remember all the good things that God has given you. My one last little aside here. Yesterday, my buddy Mark and I were writing the sermon for Sunday. And we're writing it, and to be completely honest with everyone here, you have to keep the secret though, okay? We've used this sermon series before, about in Christmas of 2012. And this sermon series is called Exodus, A Christmas Story. And it's looking at the Matthew's gospel going through. And so we were looking at, we're writing this, and we're like, well, what did we say last time? Normally, we don't really like to do that. We're like, what did we say last time? And it was kind of similar to what we wrote this time, but the ending was different. The way the gospel came out of it was different this time. And it kind of forced me, I don't know if it forced Mark to do this, but it kind of forced me to stop and remember and be thankful for just a second. Because the ending of that sermon, which I'm not going to ruin it for you guys yet. It's so much different than it used to be. And it's because of what my life has been like in the last 5 years. Because in the last 5 years, I've sat with people when they've just had a brand new baby and filled with joy. But I've also sat with people when it looks like they might not have heat in the dead of winter. I've sat with people as they've breathed their last breath. I've sat with people where alcohol has destroyed their lives and their family. And I've had so much stress put onto me in the situation that I was in, that I ended up getting shingles when I was 33 years old. And yesterday, as we were finishing that sermon, I was like, the gospel that's being talked about there couldn't have happened without all of that remembering. So your life may be tough, and it might be good. It's probably a bit of both. But remember and be thankful that God has brought you through it all, and that you're here, and that you and your life is a physical testimony to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's something I think we all can be thankful for. And that's all I have for today. Let's pray.